Absolutely. I think that, my goal is to, really wipe out the bad trainers because I feel like there's a lot of trainers that don't know what they're doing and they're actually doing more harm than good because,
Yeah.
a lot of people, I think they go in with the assumption that you can't do exercise wrong, but you clearly
You
can.
can do it so wrong.
You can do it wrong. And there's actually, I think there was some other study, I think that Dr. Cobb from Z Health talked about where he said that they actually did a study and there was over a 17-week period, these people who were couch potatoes before who thought that they could just go and exercise arbitrarily with no guidance actually went backwards. Their body fat went up. They ended up losing strength, decreased muscle. And so you would think that, just getting in the gym and just working out is good enough, but you got to have a system. You have to have a methodology that you know is going to work, and it has to work for them and where they're at and where their nervous system's at.
Yeah. So at some point, this technology is really just going to come down to guys like you and me taking our own philosophies, putting them down into a step-by-step system that can be applied by somebody through the use of this technology, and then just tweaking and testing the system to make sure it optimizes itself. Is that correct?
Exactly. I think it'll create a whole new genre of opportunities for the people who actually know their stuff and are good at it
Yeah.
with virtual coaching. Because I think people are still going to need to be accountable to reaching those goals. They're still going to need a coach to continual education and guidance. So the people that actually know what they're talking about, and really the people who have a thirst for knowledge, those are going to be the gurus. Because the average individual who has a normal 9 to 5 job or another focus and isn't in the fitness industry, they don't have the element of time. Us in the fitness industry, this is all we do, and we do it for a living. So it will be our job to search for the correct information and then relay that back to the clients. And the people that do that best will be the market leaders in the fitness industry.
Yeah, I like to think of myself as kind of a curator of thought processes. I've got guys like you and guys like Ido Portal and guys like John Berardi coming on this podcast, and they all have different ideas. And I like to just bring that out and try to see if I can get the best out of them and share it with them. I think that's such a great way to go about things. So does that mean that people who succeed the most with this are just going to have the greatest personality brand in addition to system of exercise?
Well, I think personality always plays a part. I don't think you can ever really have high tech without high touch. You got to have that
Sure.
relationship factor as well. But my problem is I can't stand when trainers try to overuse that or overcompensate with that. They try to overuse the charisma and trying to be eccentric rather than actually trying to just do the work. Stop looking for shortcuts and just do the work.
God, that's so funny. You mentioned that, and it makes me laugh because I was out at the gym the other day, and I was watching a trainer I know with a close friend of mine train them. I'm not going to say any names here, but they were just training them, and they just didn't look like they gave a rat's ass about the training session. And then when the time was come to chat, they were really good at like puffing that person up and making them feel really good about their training session. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, that works. You can continue getting work because that person feels good because you tell them they're good. But at the end of the year, they're going to go home and they're going to be the same weight and they're going to have the same strength and they're going to have the same movement patterns and so on and so forth. Now, that's really
Yeah.
sad. But I think that you're right, that you can't escape technology without some element of connection with like another human being that currently we can't see being replaced. What's your thoughts on that? Like how do you play both roles? How do you give somebody the technology to do it, but still have that motivational aspect that a great coach can give you as well?
Well, I think you need to create that community, and
Yeah.
with technology, you have that ability with social networking to create communities. I mean, if you look at CrossFit was really successful because they created a community inside of a brick and mortar. But I think you could do the same online with technology if done right.
Sure.
And if you think about kind of just human nature, is we kind of seek that validation. We seek affiliation with others. It's kind of from Maslow's old hierarchy of needs. Is how high of a need of affiliation do people have, and I think that must be fulfilled. There must be some type of social engagement, and it was actually interesting. I came across an article by a big venture capital firm named Kleiner Perkins, and they own MyFitnessPal, and they even said that that the problem with all the technologies that are out there right now, including MyFitnessPal, is they don't engage people enough. They don't give people enough of a reason to continue to go back and use it, even though that there is tools and utilities in there. You still have to have something more than that. And I think the human part of it, the human element, the relationship element is that missing piece.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. We launched a product last year called CT50, and we launched a Facebook community within CT50, and we got about 1,000 or so people on there right after the bat, and it was the most amazing thing to watch people support each other, connect with each other, answer each other's questions. And to me, that's what kept them going and keeping them moving forward with the system. It wasn't the system itself. It was that connection, that relationship they built. Like they were all going through this transformation together. So I think that I completely agree with you on that one.
Nice.
We've been talking a lot about technology and trainers and how they suck and fallacies of the fitness world. You talked about systems, though. How do you trust a trainer? It's if they have systems. Let's talk about your system. So where do you start somebody who comes in the train? What are your kind of foundational movement patterns? How do you approach fitness for the average person coming down your pipe?
Well, yeah, the main thing I do is, I look at, first I like to educate them on really what the main focus is. And the focus is on optimizing stress tolerance. And that goes back to the brain. So the focus I explained is like your brain is like a GPS. And you need to get certain information from certain satellites to that GPS, so that way it knows where it's at. Your brain wants to constantly know where it is relative to space, and so those other units are things like your muscles and your tissue, your vision, and your vestibular system, your inner ear. So those three systems, if they don't give the right information to the brain, that's not going to allow for progress or results. So really recalibrating and making sure that the satellites are working correctly to make sure that all the results can be built upon a strong foundation. I think most people walk in the gym, they're walking in with a poor foundation because they don't think like that. They think that, oh, I could just go, load up with some good dumbbells and barbells and I'll be good and I'll lose weight. But the reality is you have to acknowledge that your body's not getting the right information from those sources, and that's what's creating the dysfunction. That's what's creating the pain, the tightness that never seems to foam roll away. And that's what seems to create the increase in weight gain or the fat gain when they're working out trying to lose body fat.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing I try to do is really focus on that. And then the second thing I do is I really try to create specificity each workout day. So when the client comes in, I focus on what was your sleep quality last night? What are your stress levels today? And then adapt it based on that. So I'm not gonna stick to some cookie cutter workout plan. Just because my workout card says so.
Yeah, when somebody didn't sleep and they're all stressed out, and you're like, okay, well, we got to max out on squats today, bro.
Exactly. It doesn't make sense to do
that. It doesn't, man. So it sounds like you take a very foundational approach. So when somebody comes into you, you run them through an assessment to make sure that these functions are working properly before you ever even have them do any sort of movements. Is that correct?
Exactly. We look at mobility. We look at how much rotation do you have at the spine. How mobile are the hips, ankles, and knees and shoulders. All those fundamental hip joints that have to have mobility. And then what we do is we try to build stability, because mobility without stability isn't a good thing. And that's why yogis fall short there if they don't balance out their yoga with weight training, because they're building passive range of motion without building strong stability and support. You have to have that support, because if you don't, it goes back to the brain. The brain thinks that it should have a startle response. No different than if someone was going to throw a rock at your face, you would have this tightening reflex, this startle response. That's essentially what your brain is doing to the muscles in the body. It's thinking that, okay, there's a threat, and you haven't addressed that threat, so I'm going to tighten and defend myself, to defend the spine and defend the key joints. So that's really why a big focus of our program has always been to create mobility and stability first, and create what I call movement efficiency, and then progressing into more force optimization. Figuring out, how am I going to load the muscles? Now that I have a strong foundation, how can I load the muscles best for this individual?
I like how you mentioned mobility and stability there as two ends of a spectrum almost. Like a power lifter can be extremely stable, but the likelihood of having a lot of mobility is pretty low, because you can't squat a grand and do the splits at the same. Well, most people can. I actually know one guy who can, named Bud Jeffries, but most people can't, right? And then on the mobility end of the spectrum, like these yogi people that don't have any strength whatsoever, it's not going to really help you in the long run as well. How do you balance those two ends of the spectrum? Because I would assume, let me rephrase the question and start at the basics. Do you see more people coming in with mobility issues or stability issues?
I'd say it's a bit of both, but probably more mobility issues.
Yeah.
I think that people, if people exercise, they're going to have some kind of stability depending on what you're doing.
Sure.
But they go really hand in hand. I mean, sometimes I say that mobility and stability are kind of synonymous in a way. But the problem is it all goes back to how is that those movement patterns, how are they encoded and ingrained in the brain? That's the main thing, is how have they been trained? It's like riding a bike. You can visualize riding a bike, but until you actually do it and train the brain and teach it to do it, you're not going to be able to.
Right, right. So you have to work on that stuff. Man, mobility is a pain in the butt, though. I got to tell you that most people who I've seen over the course of time who have tight joints, even if we do neural activation drills, tons of mobility, stretching, so on and so forth, certain joints can take a long time. Have you had that same experience with people, like ankle joints, certain parts of the spine taking a really long time to remobilize?